Welcome to another module. So we already covered a lot. And now in this module, I want to touch on a very important topic, which is key to develop successful JavaScript applications. Now, which topic might that be? Errors and debugging. When you write your code, you will get errors. That's just a normal thing. You won't write perfect code all the time. So you will have some nasty bugs, and in order to find them, you will have to debug. Or you also might have parts in your program where you can't control if you'll eventually get an error or something like this. In such a case, you need a built-in way to handle errors. In this module, we'll have a look at both things. I'll start with the debugging, and for this I'm here in my editor WebStorm because I need to create a local project, but no worries, it's really simple. I'll only create two files here. The first one will be an index.html file, and here I'll just create a very basic HTML5 skeleton where I have my doc type, my HTML tag, my head section here, and my body. And I won't write any HTML code besides that. All I will do is later I'll import a script file I'm creating now. So I'm just creating my script.js file. And in this file, I'll copy some prepared code. Now, of course, you'll find the code attached to this lecture, that's for sure. So this will be the code, and all I'm doing here is I'm setting some variables or initializing some variables here. Then I have a for loop where I mess around with my values here and reassign some of them or assign them for the first time, like C, for example. And then I log them all. So not a really useful program, but great for demonstrating how you can debug your applications with various tools. So in my index.html file, I'll then just add a script tag and import this file I just created, so the script.js file, so that I'm loading it in my program. Next, I will simply run it, so I'll load it in my browser. And don't get confused by that URL, that's just a little service of WebStorm. It's like hosting a little mini server here, but you may just open your HTML file in your browser, so just right-clicking on it in the Explorer, for example, or double-clicking and auto-executing it. So just run this file in your browser. Now, you won't see anything here, of course, because, well, it's just an empty page. And now the important part comes. I'm using Chrome here, and Chrome has great developer tools built in. You might, of course, also use Firefox or Internet Explorer. Both of them also ship with developer tools. However, the part I'm showing here only refers to Chrome, since I strongly recommend Chrome for development because it really has a good support. If you want to use another browser, simply look up how the developer tools there work. In general, developer tools all share some basic functionalities. And I'll open up my developer tools here in Chrome by hitting Command Alt and I, or Control Alt and I on Windows. And this will open up my, developer tools here. Now, in these developer tools, you most likely start on this elements page in Chrome here, where you can see your HTML element, the various elements you got there, so the HTML code or the DOM, you will later come to that in the course, and so on. So that is not really the interesting part. Here you see that we logged something to the console, and that of course is due to these four statements here. So our code is running, which is great. But in order to debug the JavaScript code, you can either click in Chrome on this link here. This shows which line and which file was responsible for this log. Or you go to the Sources tab here, and then you will find the sources of your project. And if you don't see it there, simply hit reload one more time and you should see this script.js file here. So this is the script file, and Chrome identified that this file is being imported and therefore run by your, index.html file in this case. So now you can see your code here, and that's great, but you can do even more. For example, you can click on one of the line numbers to set a breakpoint. Now the next time this script gets executed, the code execution will stop here and give you a chance to have a look at the current values of the variables and so on during runtime. And I'll demonstrate this. So I set a breakpoint on that if condition here, and I will reload my page. Now you see I have this paused in debugger message here, and the page hasn't finished loading. As you can also see in the console where I'm currently not logging something, these are still the old logs. So now you can see we're pausing here, this line is highlighted, and here you got some interesting analysis. You, for example, can analyze that your global scope, the window, has, well, certain properties, quite a lot, as it is the window, of course. And amongst them here, you will also find your variables, A, B, and so on. So that is one thing. You can check your scopes, and if you would have a local scope here due to a function, you would see that here too. You also see your breakpoints, like the one we're pausing here. And if we're here, you can hover over your variables and you will see their current values. For example, that B is 5 or I is currently 0 because we're in the first iteration of this loop. Now with these buttons here, you can now continue with the code execution. You can either hit this blue play button here to, well, resume script execution and let it run until the end or the next breakpoint. Or you can now step through it step by step. Or if you have a function call, even step into that call so that you get into that function instead of just returning or continuing with the returned value and have a look into that function. So I can now click step over next function call, and you will see that now the blue line jumped to the next if statement. Of course, it didn't go into the if statement because the condition is not satisfied. I is 0, A is 2, so I is not greater than A, and therefore the condition already fails because we have a Boolean operator which requires both conditions to be true, and therefore it doesn't matter that the second operation or the second condition here, would be true. So I, 0, is of course smaller than 5. But the first one fails, therefore we get to the next if statement where we check if I is equal to 3. Well, that of course is also not the case since I is 0. So we will skip over this and start with the next loop round. So we can now step into that to not only skip over it. And now we see I is 1. So we can go ahead, click on this button all the time to get into it. And here you just see the various parts which are executed. And now we see that I is 3 and A is 2. So I is now greater than A, and it's also still smaller than B. So now we should get into this if statement, and we do. So now C is still undefined because we haven't finished this line yet, but if I click this button one more time, you see that now C is equal to 1000. And this is how you can check your code and check during runtime what the values of your variables are. You can even go ahead, and I will show you this if I add another breakpoint, and now I click the play button to continue until the next play breakpoint, and I will remove this one simply by clicking on it. So now it stops here, and the value of A currently is 2. Well, the cool thing is you can select A, and then you can either watch it to open up a new watcher on the right here to constantly track the value of A, or you can also evaluate in the console to print it. And now in the console set A equals 3. Hit enter. And now A is set equal to 3. And if I continue, you see it got updated here. And it also printed 3. So you can also change the values during runtime. You can not only watch them, you can also change them to simulate some other scenarios, for example. So now I can just let this finish, and now you will see the screen unlocks again, and we finished the script. And this is a very useful tool to, well, debug your code and to find your errors. And one you will probably oftentimes use in your code or when creating your applications.